again later if I need to.
I don't know what to do. It says it's live.
Yeah, my phone isn't showing it as live, but let me go on.
Where are we live? We're live somewhere.
It says I can only click now and end broadcast button. Those are my options.
I've got us. We're live.
We're live. Oh,
okay. Yay.
All right, we're going to start over just in case. But I'm Angela from Literature Science Alliance.
I'm Judith from Deadwood Book Reviews.
I'm Kerry from Kerry Louise Reads.
I'm Nikki from Books and Lemon Squash.
I'm Kerry from Kerry Louise Reads.
I'm Stephanie from Mr. Richard's Reads.
So if you can't tell, it's really early for some of us and really late for other people, and it's the new year and we don't know what we're doing, but we're going to talk about Seven Devils, and I think there's a wide array of opinions, so it should be fun. We're going to first start like spoiler-free, our general thoughts. So if you haven't read the book, you can hang out for a bit, but somewhere along the line, I'm sure we'll be in the nitty-gritty details of exactly why we loved or hated X. So we will get there. So Judith, this is your first time in the stream, so why don't you start us off with your general thoughts on this book?
So this was my second time reading this for this because I'm dedicated and I didn't want to let you guys down. So I was like, I better reread it. And I have to say that I read it last week of last year, something like that. And I now can't remember most of the characters' actual names. So it's really stuck with me. Changed my life. I've rebranded my whole self around it. No, I think it is a good book. It was entertaining, but I suffered from kind of being read amongst some really other good things, including Becky Chambers. And like, how can you sci-fi alongside Becky Chambers? Like, how do you do it? But overall, entertaining, just not one that I'd be like, yes, let me read it 50 billion more times.
That seems fair to me. Yeah. I really did enjoy, when I was reading it, I was really enjoying reading it. I found it quite fast-paced. I like the multiple timelines in books. That's always a winner with me. And I liked pretty much all the characters. I thought they were all really interesting. The things I didn't like will be in the spoiler section. In brief, I felt a bit let down by the ending. And I'll talk a bit more about that when we go into the spoilery section. But it was enjoyable when I was reading it. Definitely.
I think I really, really did enjoy it. And now I'm like, you're going to ruin it for me. You're going to point out all the things I didn't spot when I was reading it, and then I'm going to be like annoyed by in retrospect.
Well, Stephanie, you just finished it, so you can't have the excuse if you've forgotten everyone's name, or else it's going to be a pretty bad point.
I binged this in less than 24 hours, mainly because I knew I had to finish it. But I had a good time. There were a couple of things that bothered me, but it didn't really take away from my enjoyment of the story so much. But like Judith, I wouldn't reread it all the time, but it was a good, fun story.
Yeah, for me, I thought of it as like a sci-fi action movie book. And for some reason, although like in an action movie, I'm way more forgiving about plot. Like, is there a plot is not always an answer I need for an action movie. Like, I'm just like, are cool things happening? But for some reason, there were some plot things that I did find like, they made less sense to me than I wanted, to the point where it took me out of the story occasionally. And I'm like, you women are all very intelligent. I can tell you're intelligent. This is a bad move. This is really bad. Why are we doing this?
Yeah. A lot of my criticisms come down to that as well.
So like, I really did like it. And like, it was funny because I was talking to Kayla, who's not here today. And I was like, I gave it 3 stars, but it was like a fun 3 stars. Like, I read it pretty fast. It was like the perfect amount of story I wanted for the time I read it. I think I've been saying it's like Throne of Glass and like Red Rising and Star Wars kind of all like together in weird ways of the tropey elements, at least.
Yeah. To me, kind of Firefly meets The Matrix.
Yes.
There's a lot of Firefly in there too. Like, it had a lot of comfortable elements. Yeah. And then it just made some plot decisions that I was like, I wouldn't be as mad if I was visually watching this, but because I'm reading it and I get to spend more time with you, you get more of my brain.
Yeah.
I was ages ago. I was in fact October of 2019. We went to Galangsfest, which is like one of the. They do a bunch of panels, and most of it was wonderful. But there was this one panel with a person who was just frustrating and annoying, and was suggesting that all sci-fi had to be like dark and worthy and really important and significant, and like comfort reading sci-fi was pointless. He did not win the will of the crowd, but I was thinking about that in relation to this book, and I think I've been. Because I don't read a lot of sci-fi, and that which I do read is usually recommended by someone else because it does this amazing thing and it's wonderful. I don't read a lot of sci-fi just for the sake of it, and I think that this is like a fun, just bonusy sci-fi read. I think that's where I would probably be more inclined to agree with. I'm pointing the wrong way, but we agree with Nikki of that fun aspect of it. Whereas if you're going to compare it to like bigger, more conceptual stuff, it doesn't hit that. It's, as you say, action movie kind of things.
I love an action movie sci-fi though. Who doesn't?
Yeah.
I think it was really fun. I just think there were like small things that like it wouldn't have minded the confusion if it didn't take me out of the story. Like if I was just like, this is a little weird, let me keep going, but it actively like I would stop me from reading, and I would just be like, what did I miss to make this seem like the only reason we were doing X? Like, did I miss something? This isn't a book that's that complex. I shouldn't have dropped a thread somewhere.
Yeah.
But that's like a personal experience thing. Like I feel like if it was almost a 4-star read for me if it weren't for like those plot things. I don't think it was ever going to be a 5-star for me unless like it had like, I don't know. It had a lot of the tropes I liked, but none of them were done in a way that was special.
Yeah.
I do see what you mean. I actually gave it. I've just re-looked my review to remind myself. I actually gave it 4.5 stars, and now I'm like, oh god.
No, you can give it 4.5 stars.
No, well, yeah, but I actually I like fun sci-fi and I like action movies, and I think kind of like the times where you're saying, oh, why were you going off and doing these things? That makes sense. Like a lot of the time, I completely agree with you. I'm like yelling at the book, and I think there was one I was reading recently where I was reading it on a chat and I was literally yelling at it, and the people I was on a video call with were just like, what is going on in that book? Because I was like, what are you doing? But in this one I was like, yes, do that terrible thing, it's going to be excellent. So I think I was like cheering on the bad decisions because it was funny. Which is probably not the right response, but I like it.
No.
Yeah, one thing that I thought was really good in this book was the amount of diversity in the characters. I mean, for like 5 central female characters, they were all very different from each other.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really well done. And particularly, I saw someone on Twitter who is autistic saying that the representation of Ariadne as a neurodiverse character was really spot on. And so I really enjoyed reading it from that perspective of like seeing all this different diversity, like Chloe with the prosthetic leg and the various sexualities represented, and I'm sure there was reference to different skin tones as well. So I thought that was really well woven in, that it didn't feel like it was clobbering you over the face with the diversity. It was just there, and that was just how these people were. And I thought that was really really well done.
I want to especially agree about
Birdie in the comments also was saying that they really liked the rep in the book.
Yeah. No, I think it's like she was saying, like, oh, it's really painful and things like that. And I was like, yes, because I don't think I've ever seen anyone with a prosthetic leg. No, once. I think I've read it once.
Yeah, and what I liked about that particularly was that like it could have been made out to be like this massive issue, like she couldn't do any of these things because of it. She carried on, and it didn't get in the way, and she complained about it hurting, but it was like it didn't stop her doing any of the stuff. And so I thought that was like, for me, that was really well portrayed.
And I think it can also be a really interesting world building thing, particularly when you're looking at this kind of weird, very controlled society on the surface. If you're looking at, she has a prosthetic leg, but it doesn't fit correctly. Where has something gone wrong, and where's she fallen through the gaps of how this should be being managed? Should this be being managed by whatever the interstellar NHS is? And I think that can be a really interesting just bit of kind of subliminal world building as well. But I really liked as well that it was, as you say, 5 central female characters who were all very different from each other in a lot of ways, including personality. And it didn't feel like anyone had gone, well, we're going to bring in this character from this franchise that everyone loves and change her name and make her wear a hat. And, you know, it's we put all of these characters that we already know together. They felt like full-fledged people doing stuff.
Does anyone have any other non-spoiler general musings and thoughts before we get into being able to reference specific details?
I have one. Because it bothers me. The accent with Chloe, it isn't a spoiler, but like part of her, and maybe because I listened to it on audio, I noticed it more, but like part of it was like Scottish, but then she spoke regularly the rest of the time, and it was really jarring.
Yeah. I listened to it as well, and because the narrator on the audiobook has quite a thick Scottish accent anyway, like, it didn't feel as jarring as you guys were saying it could be in the text. So I think it kind of, I definitely noticed it, and I noticed when Chloe was using the Scottish words as well, but like for some reason I don't think I kind of clocked that they would be written like that, even though some of them obviously would have been.
Yeah. It didn't.
Go ahead.
It didn't bother me too much reading it. And I think at one point it kind of felt like when she was more stressed, her accent thickened, which is something I've noticed with some of my friends that like have lived in different places, and their accent comes out at different times depending on what they're talking about and how frustrated they are. So yeah, it didn't bother me hugely, but I can see why it would bother people.
And maybe it's just because I listened to it in such a short amount of time. I didn't just spread it out, but
Sorry.
It reminded me of Scotty from Star Trek.
Well, and I think I was talking to you guys about the chat. I did notice the dialect change in the writing because it's very apparent, and you have to like figure out, oh, what does this new word mean in this slang? But I literally just thought it was a slang for a planet in space. I didn't know it was Scottish because I'm really bad at that when I'm reading dialects. I don't necessarily, unless it's like Southern, and then sometimes I can really tell it's a Southern accent, or Caribbean dialects are pretty easy for me to parse out. But for me, I just thought it was actual complete unique world building. I'm a little disappointed that it wasn't, because you could have just made your own slang for this city in a place.
But I think that's really interesting though, because actually, correct me if I'm wrong, people who've read it more recently than I have, but they don't ever say, you know, Chloe was from this human planet that was very, very far descended from Scotland. So in theory, it is just a slang place. And I think it was really, like, how do you convey to your audience, if you want to say this accent sounds like Scottish, there isn't really a way to do that if your world doesn't have a Scotland just to do that without writing it out. And I think it's a weird thing because we know it's Scottish, but if you didn't know that, as you say, would it just be like she has kind of a weird planet accent?
That's what it was for me. I can confirm.
Yeah.
I think it wouldn't have been as jarring for me if there hadn't been such a contrast.
Yeah.
Like if it had been more consistent, I wouldn't have noticed it.
What do you mean by contrast? Because at least in the writing of it, it was very clear that she only spoke with that accent when she was in her flashbacks or when like shit was hitting the fan. Like that's when she switched into that accent in the book, because she basically assimilated to the common dialect accent for almost everything else, because that's what people expected.
Yeah, I can, and this is just my own personal, because I totally agree with that. I don't know how they would fix it. I guess I don't know. Like I've had friends move from here to Ireland and they kind of have an Irish accent, but it's not so different that you wouldn't know they weren't from there. And I know the point for them was to assimilate into the cultures. I don't know. It was just such a huge contrast for me. And I may not have noticed it had I not just binged this whole thing.
It might also have just been the actor's choice. Maybe they really made it like really jarring. But when you're like, at least when I was reading it, I was just like, oh, I don't know what this word is, but it means this. And I'm moving on. Like, I wasn't like translating it into an acting part of my brain.
Yeah. And that would make a big difference.
Well, I find it quite good that like obviously the Brits kind of recognise a lot of the words, but you were saying you genuinely kind of thought it was a made up thing, but you knew what the words meant, which was perfect. That's exactly what it needs to be. So I always find that really good.
Are we now going to have to start sending Angela those like Scottish Twitter things to translate?
Oh, I love those. I love those.
I want to make you guys read all of the Caribbean dialect works. If you think that's hard, Midnight Robber is 100% dialect, and that was a ride.
I've had to read some Jamaican poetry for my English degree, and it's fun, but it takes a while to get into it. And I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah, well, it's because the grammar's different. Like it's really interesting.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. You just have to like realize, oh, I have to think of this word as this word and way I process sentence structure, and like it's really interesting. But that's off topic. We're gonna go now into the spoiler section because we should talk about some things. Let's start positive. So start positive, and then we can get into the why were you guys being so dumb.
Nikki, go. You enjoyed the book.
I know, I'm desperately trying to think of something.
Well, I like the flashbacks personally.
Yeah.
I
think
find
they were
flashbacks a
good.
little hit and miss, but actually I thought they really, really worked here. And it gave the much needed kind of clarity as to what happened between Chloe and Eris as well, which I think we'll probably come on to a bit later because I think we were all a little annoyed about that aggro. But I really liked learning about the planet that they visit that Chloe grew up on. I don't remember the name. And like seeing that contrast of it as well, and seeing all the contrast of how Eris grew up as well. I thought that was really, really interesting.
I really liked the moments of tension that showed up that like were like kind of like I said, tropey classic things, like when they're in the planet with the weird disease. Well, anytime they were with the disease thing, I'm like, why are you so like calm about this disease rock?
Yes.
Maybe that's pandemic brain. I don't know, but I'm just like, every sci-fi movie I've ever seen says this goes poorly. And then when I forget her name gets the cut and I'm like, oh, she's dead. She's dead.
I know, and Ariadne was just like, oh, you might bleed out of every orifice, but it's okay. We'll be fine. And it's like...
She's wonderful, though. Like, she was just so matter of fact. She's like, oh, yeah, you might die. And everyone was like, wait, what? And Ariadne was like, I love her.
Yeah, I also loved the first chapter because I feel like a lot of us, or at least a lot of BookTube, complains about how if you have an assassin badass character, as is common in young adult, but you don't show them doing badass assassin things, we're tired of that. And like our first scene with Eris is just murder. So
that was a really good opening chapter.
Yeah. Although I will say that I don't think I got like why she kept doing things like that. Like, especially she was like, oh yeah, I'm not going to kill people. And I'm like, that's literally your job. I thought that was the only thing. I'm not quite sure that quite tracks.
But I thought that was really an interesting part of that relationship between, I know we've said we will come on to it, but who knows when. But her relationship with Chloe and this kind of promise between them of, you said you'd stop murdering people willy-nilly, but you keep doing it. What's gives? And I think that's a really interesting thing to explore with all of the flashbacks as well, for context of like, she's already killed quite a lot of people that Chloe might not necessarily know about as well. Yeah. And how much of that one of the big themes of indoctrination in the book is how far does that go, even when you really don't want to, and at what point do you have to say, like, I made a promise to you, but we didn't think of this scenario.
They didn't think of any scenario, sorry.
No, they didn't. No, I mean, I think that also, though, like, I think you make a good point, Judith, but this was one of the many, like, softer world building points that, like, I just think weren't fleshed out, like, super well, which isn't that important, but, like, was something I noticed, like, okay, you're all into this, like, god of death, and you're the chosen of death, but, like, why? Like,
yeah,
you can leave the church. Like, I don't know, like, you can...
Did you pick this job? Did someone pick it for you?
Yeah. Well, and then, like, since I'm just talking about the world building things, I also had a real big gripe with this one. The Oracle and One, are they the same?
Yes.
I think
They
so.
are, but the way it's talked about in the book makes it feel like two entities for a very long time, and it's never
I read-
explained.
I think I read it as the one is Ariadne's relationship directly with the AI, like their bond, and the Oracle is it functioning in society and within people. But that
other
might
people
just be me
talk about the one
rationalizing it
too.
now.
I think it refers to itself as the one, which is why, like, so the Oracle is sort of like what it is, but it refers to itself as the one. So, like, it will often, like, if it was like doing an act, it'd be like, the one says, stand up. I don't know why I went for a Simon Says version, but that's what it was. And and you know, that's why it was sort of there more, maybe.
Other people, like, I can't explain how many times it's come up with everyone's perspective chapters. Everyone thought of it in both ways.
Oh,
Like everyone interchangeably in the same sentence would refer to the Oracle and the One. And I'm really into world building when I read. Like, I don't care how confusing something is, as long as it chooses to be completely confusing or it explains itself. And I think part of this was two writers were writing it. There was a lot of repetition in this book, just in terms of sentences that would actually just almost verbatim show up a few times. And I was just like, okay, if we're going to keep talking about it, because I think if we did a Control F on this book, the Oracle and the One would have come up like 50 times. And I'm just like, can you just tell me now what it is? Like, info dump something. Like, I'm done. But that was just a small thing. That didn't actually affect my rating. It was just like, I even messaged Kayla, and she's like, I don't actually know the answer. And I finished the book. And I'm like, this was not done extremely well.
Yeah. It definitely didn't need two names. You could have just referred to it as the Oracle the whole way through.
Yeah, I felt like it was like the one was how it referred to itself. I think someone just said so. That's how I read it. That's why both were used interchangeably. But yeah, it didn't need to have two names. It could have just as easily had one name, and it would have made more sense.
Because let me tell you what my brain did for half the book. I thought there was like another AI robot person character. I made another character for this world building element for a long time because I didn't know what was happening. And there wasn't another. There was no man behind the curtain. That's what I had.
what do you mean? I have never done this. I have never assumed one character was more than one character.
But Carrie, do you want to talk about why some decisions don't make sense?
Yeah. So I just felt like the whole way through the book, it made out that Eris was this like brilliant, can't think of the word, like brilliant planner, strategic brain. And it emphasized so much how many times she beat her brother at that like chess game that they played. And even emphasized that Nyx also beat him at this chess game. So I was fully expecting them. So everything seems to be going wrong, and they're getting to this big meeting with this other racist treaty signing thing. And I was expecting them to pull something out of the bag. Like, so there used to be a TV show in the UK called Hustle, which was about a group of con artists. And every episode, it looked like everything was going horribly wrong. And then at the end, the leader of the group would flip the switch, and it would tell you all the ways that he'd planned for every eventuality and how they still won the day. So I was expecting that, because it had been going on and on about how brilliant Eris was at strategy. And so when that didn't happen and they lost and had to run away and it was all a big disaster, and I was just like, I just felt so let down, because it didn't feel consistent with the way the characters have been set up that he would beat them. And so to me, it felt like this whole book was just a setup for the next book. And I don't like that. But yeah, so, and in terms of like the decision making, so you've just found out that all your spies have been compromised and are probably dead. So you're going to send someone else in whose identity has probably also been compromised and not question that. Like, why was that a sensible thing to do? Like, as soon as you know that all your spies are compromised, you've got to know that either they've been tortured and have revealed all your secrets, or someone has already revealed all your secrets in order for the spies to be compromised. Yeah. So, you know, and the fact that everything was happening so easily and they never questioned it. And it's like, so Damocles reveals at the end, oh yeah, no, I left the trail for you. And like, why did they never question that they were getting away with it. Like they got away with stealing this ship with this precious cargo and killing the Archon guy on it, and no one seemed to care that the ship had gone missing, and everything just happened way too easily, and it was niggling at me the whole time. And so then when he revealed that was why, I was like, well, they've got to have a backup plan. They've got to have an out here. And then they didn't. So that was my major criticism.
I'm going to add on to it because for me, it started, I mean, I didn't mind that it subverted the whole normal trope of actually, though, we had this backup plan. Like, I didn't mind that. What I minded was when they made a super weapon and thought that that was the only way to do what they did. And it didn't even do that much. It's like, you can only infiltrate this planet to let this young child get into the computer, because that was the only thing that they accomplished, was getting on the computer. So you have to meet with your psychotic brother and to do that, which why do we have to meet with him to accomplish the get on the computer task? I don't know. But the only way to meet with him is to give him a super weapon. Like, are we not going to talk about other options?
And they tried to build in a failsafe, but the only way they could build in the failsafe was if it had been used 5 times. I'm like, I'm sure you can come up with a better failsafe than that. Like, just have it malfunction the first time and be like, oh, sorry, we clearly need to do some more work on it. I'll kill the person that told me it was ready.
And thank you so much for inviting me to your planet. Nobody look at the computer system. Goodbye.
I mean, I think I get why they couldn't have done, like, it not working at all, because, like, that wouldn't have made any sense. So I think the 5 times was like because it had to work a couple of times, and they thought, well, like 5 is a good minimum number. But like, yeah, and I think this is the part where I was like, it is just like, I'm gonna say bad action movie, but I mean in the sense that thoroughly enjoyable action movie. And I was just there going, yes, this is gonna be so wrong. I can't believe you're doing this.
Well. And then they kept saying the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And it's very, yeah, it kept reminding me of movies, which didn't bother me, but they're so worried about killing people.
I did like the reveal with the, I can't remember her name, the courtesan person.
Rhea?
Yeah, who did actually remind me of that character in Firefly. Like, they weren't exact, but we were talking about how they didn't quite do everything, but like that one, I was remembering her. But I did like the whole reveal of like her being that like other humanoid species, but not really.
Yeah,
that was fun.
Yeah, that was good.
And like, I liked when Damocles was like, ha, got you. Like, I liked those like moments of twisty plot tension. Like, I don't mind if those make sense, because like you said, Nikki, like storytelling wise, like that's really fun. Like if I was watching a movie, I just really wasn't behind the whole making the super gun, and I never got a real answer as to why this was our only solution. And part of me wonders, which I'm not going to reread it, but we find out at the end who in the thing was the mule, or maybe corrupted by the one, or whatever. Like, was he the one who came up with that plan? I can't remember who initiated the plan.
I think it was like Rhea and the guard lady, whose name I've also forgotten.
Yeah, it was one of her.
Was saying that was his pet project that he'd been trying to do for ages. So it was the way in the door, and I was like, does he not want anything else? Like box of chocolates? But I see I actually, like, to me it made a little bit of sense in terms of like, it's hard to get that meeting with him. And obviously they don't know that he would have taken it anyway, because he knew all along what was happening.
But why did we need the meeting with him? That's what I never understood. Why did we need this face-to-face? What did we gain from that meeting? Other than like maybe a fun D&D moment, which is great for storytelling, sure. But like in terms of the plan of save the day, what did that meeting accomplish?
It was meant to be to try and dig for information, but it was obvious he was never going to reveal anything that he didn't want to reveal. So then why they were trusting any information they were given from meeting with him.
Yeah.
Because the next step of the plot happened purely from what they got from the computer. Because they got, like, I just feel like if for a chance at some information, the trade is a super gun, that's a very, like, that's not the stakes we're going for.
Yeah, that's
having a big party anyway. Like, just add yourself onto the guest list for the party. Like, if you can hack into the computer and like change your faces and change the name of the ship. Like, just add yourself to the guest list, surely.
I spent a lot of time thinking about this, which is why it became like a high 3, because I was just like, guys.
Yeah. That's like the ending, like the more I think about it, the more it winds me up that if she was so clever, why did he manage to trick them? When the whole time you've been telling us that he's not as clever as she is.
But again, I think some of this is me pulling threads together. I think some of this comes down to the idea of choice and free will, which again, massive theme of the book, and that in some ways you can think about it that from the beginning of the book, there is no other way this can go, really, because as you say, everything's being set up. Everyone's already been betrayed before we see the start of the book, basically. And, you know, they have freed themselves from this AI, but they are still being controlled. And this is me getting waffly with it. But, you know, it's that thing of equally they are being pushed to think on their feet so much that actually Eris is slipping up. And I agree with you, Kerry. It's weird that we don't see more of her thought process in things. And I think that she falls behind, especially when Ariadne's brought in as this kind of like scientific, very clever person. It doesn't quite balance out. But I think there's some really good moments of like, my favorite thing is dramatic irony all the time. Give me all of it always. And it's like the moment where she's in disguise and he's like, play this chess game with me again. And there's a radio going, no, this is how he's going to know it's you. No, your distinctive chess playing.
But I quite enjoyed that part because I was like, brilliant. Okay, you have disguised it. And then it was like completely unneeded. And I was like, oh no. I quite liked sort of the big reveal that he'd been sort of engineering it from the start. And I think kind of, I don't think it matters to a degree how smart you are if the like the board is bigger than you think it is and stuff like that. And I think like we see that he's not dumb. He's just not. He can't win against her in this one game and stuff like that. But I think he'll also. I was expecting there to be more kind of catches in it or something like that for it to be a bit harder for him.
So I totally see that he did the breadcrumbs, but like he could not have predicted or pushed them into making the super gun that he did need to finish the plot. Like that's the linchpin.
It all comes down to the gun.
Like in order for the end of this book to happen, that gun needs to exist. But he didn't influence them to make it because he couldn't predict that would have been the one plan they came together with. Like it's so weird.
I think it was like they always were going to send, was it Rachel in? Was that her name? Something like that.
The arms dealer disguise lady.
Oh, Zoe.
Yeah. Zoe.
Sorry, why did I think Rachel?
They weren't going to send Zoe in until all of a sudden, like, weird things just started, like, snowballing in the book.
Yeah, but that could have come from, like, the spy guy, I guess. He could have said, well, let's send Zoe. And then it has to be Eris.
Yeah,
so
I don't know.
He gets to see his sister. And then they were like, well, if it's an arms dealer, what do we send? So maybe it was like he was always hoping that would be what he came up with.
Yeah, you almost need the other side of the curtain of the whole thing of Damocles being like, ha ha ha, I'm going to get them to bring me a super gun.
This is Amber. She doesn't understand what we're picking apart, but...
I think
I really want that to be a novella now of just like Damocles' point of view the whole way through, just being kind of like, I am an evil genius, mwahaha. Or for the second book to be all from his perspective, which would also be actually really interesting.
I think I want to
horrifying. No, I know.
I don't think I want that after all of this buy-in I have to these characters. That was the one thing the book did well, is like I care about, like we spent this whole time becoming a sort of found family, and now I want to see the found family exist together.
Yeah.
You know who I don't really care about? Kato.
Like, I liked him.
The token man.
Not that much of a personality. Like we didn't really.
That's because he's been controlled by a computer for his
I know. I just we got so much of everybody else, and I loved the all-girl gang. And then they brought him in, and I like him, but I'm like, if he died, I wouldn't care.
Or maybe he'll do like the Chris Hemsworth in the Ghostbusters, where he's literally just there to be the token man. I'd be down with that.
That's what I was just thinking.
Okay.
Carry the shopping.
I think he is on the cover too.
Yeah, he's up there.
That hunky guy. But like he I don't
Also,
know.
that cover spoils something, and I don't like it.
Yes, it does.
What
We
does
have
it spoil? Hold on, hold it up again.
So, I mean, it happens in like chapter 3, but if you
Oh,
don't read
okay.
the synopsis, you don't know Ares is like the lady with the crown. Like, you don't know she used to be the princess, which does happen very early, but I was really pumped when that happened.
Yeah,
Yeah, yours
I'm
is just a
not a
spaceship.
huge fan of the UK cover.
I
think-
prefer it, but then I don't like people on covers. So
I normally prefer a British cover, but I have to say I do quite like the American one here. I think they're both excellent in this case.
I do think it gave good visualization of the diversity because you did have different like
Mhm.
hairstyles, heights, and body types. That was
Yeah,
nice.
for sure.
And I think it has that action film thing
Yeah,
of,
it
you know,
does.
here's all
Such
the
a
people
movie
on the cover.
poster.
Yeah.
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 Oh yeah, I wanted to say like I have a lot of weird nitty gritty complaints. I'm excited for the second book. Like
Yeah.
I want to see what
Yes.
happens. Like it's definitely like a fun time. Like I'm having fun.
I'm genuinely really excited. I went straight on Goodreads and was like, right, I'm gonna add this. It doesn't bloody exist yet. It doesn't have a title. And I was like, right, fun.
It took them like 3 years to read this one, so I don't really know.
Oh no, don't tell me that.
It's gonna
Oh,
be
'cause-
like another Stormlight wait.
Well, they might do it faster because they might have already outlined or like
Yeah.
know what's going to happen next. But like they both have their own projects, I assume. So
Yeah, no. I mean, and that's totally and utterly reasonable, obviously. But we were saying we might not reread it. If it's going to take 3 years, we're going to damn well need to.
I mean, I think what I did find did predict like a 2022, but like who knows in publishing? Like
I'm just going to watch this again.
That's a good idea, actually.
I think if it takes that long, I might have lost interest. Like I enjoyed, for example, I enjoyed The Name of the Wind. I didn't particularly enjoy The Wise Man's Fear. I now don't care about the third book at all because it's taking so flipping long. So, you know, it might be another scenario like this for me. I enjoyed it when I was reading it, but if it's going like if it was out next year, yeah, okay, I'd read the next one. If it takes longer than that, I don't know that I'm that fussed because
I definitely think for me, it won't be one where I'm fussed enough to reread. It'll be because a lot of the times when I read series, I usually do what Judith does and I reread the stuff before it because I like things to be fresh if I care about it.
Mhm.
But it might be like one of those series which like I know this is blasphemy, but I don't like love the Poppy War as much as everyone else on the internet. Like I like it, but I don't love it like as much. So I never reread the one before it. So I always have to like catch up in my mind on what did happen in the past. And I did that with Throne of Glass too by Sarah J. Maas, which I found fun, but I wasn't going to reread the whole thing every time a book came out. So I just had to trust the authors to give me enough breadcrumbs to catch me up. And it's not like this plot's super intricate. Like I don't think they know what's happening.
No, I
They're
think you'll
playing
pick it up. Yeah. I don't do a lot of rereading, and I do generally pick it up. I often go and like reread my review, and I'll reread like the blurbs. Watching something like this would be brilliant. But I think I'll probably be all right because I don't think it is too complicated to say. But there have been a couple of books where I tried to go into it and I was like, I genuinely remember nothing, and I had to go back and reread the book, and it was really annoying. Whereas the ones where I've chosen to do it, I don't mind. But like, if you try reading book 2 or 3 and you're like, I have no idea what's going on here.
Yeah.
I think these names are
frustrating.
unique enough that it'll be good because for me it's
Yeah.
almost a names problem. I'm just like, oh, who were you? You all have A names. Which A name are you? And this one, they're all very distinct.
Brian
Yeah.
McClellan did that, and it bothered me so much.
Who?
Brian McClellan, he wrote Promise of
Oh,
Love.
yeah.
Like everybody's name had the same first letter.
I don't like when people do that in their storytelling. I'm like, that's bad communication. Like, you get to choose how things work. Even if it's common for people to have this type of structure in their name, you can make them sort of unique in these, like, 5 people that are important right now. Like, that's a choice on you as an author, and you want to communicate your story to me, so make better decisions.
Yeah, I thought that was really well done in here. They were very distinct enough to be able
Yeah.
to keep them separate.
And I
I
think
mean,
the
I still
tone-
remember the main
as
character's
well.
name, so I'm okay.
What were you going to say, Judith? I kind of, you and Nikki were the same.
Sorry.
Yeah,
No,
sorry.
I think it's the way they're written, they have very different like tones and
Yeah.
again that kind of subtle world building of what vocab do these people have and what things do they talk about. I think that's helpful, especially if you're picking up a sequel. Yeah.
Well, who was everyone's favorite character? I feel like we haven't talked about that, and there's like some options.
I think Ariadne was my favorite character.
I do love her.
She's just so fun and smart and cute.
I also love that, like, the others were like, oh, we must protect her, and she was just like, la la la, I'm gonna over this thing, like, oh, you're talking about adult stuff, I don't care. Like, which I thought was just hilarious, and she was just like, oh yeah, no, I know about death and I know about sex or whatever it is they were talking about. I just really liked that about her, because it wasn't like too tropey, but it was also kind of like, ha. I like that they were protective, but she didn't need it, and I always like that.
Yeah, and how Nyx and Rhea, they could like just run their fingers down her back or something, and she'd calm down. I thought that was so sweet.
And yeah, she was my favorite. I love that she named the rock.
I forgot about that. That's brilliant. I love that.
What was the name of the rock again? I forgot.
Josephine.
Josephine was my favorite character.
Corrected the superior officer when she called it the rock.
Yeah, and I liked that it had her like on the page experiencing a panic attack and how the others helped to come out of that. And to me, that was like, as someone who has had panic attacks, that was really lovely to have that represented as well. And that like no one made a big deal about it. They were just like, oh no, this just happens and this is how we help her. And like things like you could see her using these grounding techniques, like playing with things to help her stay in the moment. So yeah, I thought that was really cool. Like representation, both of, I know that's something that can happen with people with autism, but it's also like a trauma thing. If you've experienced trauma, then those type of grounding techniques. And it was clear that like so many of these characters had experienced trauma. So we had that rep as well, which I'm always happy to see.
I think
on that note, I think we did see the characters who had experienced trauma having to deal with their shit. And that's not terribly common, I don't think. I think kind of like, especially in, as you said, like in terms of like attacks or being like, oh my god, I have to go deal with this thing I don't want to deal with. It's not just kind of like, oh, I'm going to have, kind of strengthen my spine and go off and do something. It was genuinely really upsetting to do so, and it like to see it properly reflected on page rather than just be sort of a nod to it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty basic. My favorite character was Ares, but I like the whole like trope of her. Like she was just like a fun combination of a lot of like tropes. Like she's almost like a Dark Prince character too. I mean, she's a princess, but But I'm not disappointed by it. I don't actually mind the subversion of this trope, but did anyone else want there to be enemies to lovers or hatred to lover at the very beginning? Because that's what I wanted. Like it didn't happen, but like I wanted that banter, because we then had my other favorite trope of being able to communicate in minds with each other, which I love, and I love that in romance books when you have these secret bantery conversations in minds. But I just felt that was underutilized to like my like love of it.
I thought that's where it was gonna go, and it didn't. But it didn't bother me.
I believe in it. It's coming.
But like, I don't want her to not be with the other woman. Like, they were nice together. It's just like that was healthy. It's like I wanted the unhealthy banter of enemies to lovers.
Like, that's true. I
want everyone to suffer.
Well, okay, if we're talking about just a fun story, which we've all agreed that on the surface level, this was just to facilitate a fun story to our brains, flaws and all. That might have made me give it 4 stars, because then I would have just done, but it's like the romance was what I wanted. And
I think if I hadn't had the Chloe romance that does happen, I'd have been like, how dare you set up this mind-to-mind communication and this tension and the past history that you have. But I thought that romance was really lovely, and like the bit where she's like, look, you can look at all of the stars. I was like, you can look at all of the stars. I really loved Chloe, and I liked that they gave the character who's like this, in a book written 10 years ago, it would have been like, I'm a butch engineering character and I don't have a boyfriend because we're not brave enough to write me as queer, so we're just going to write me as, random. And to give her that really sweet plotline, and that was also all about this recovery and communication and consent.
Oh,
yes, so much. The consent was so good.
And I think the other character that I wanted more of, and would be a reason that I would pick up the next book was Kyra, the other resistance leader,
Yeah.
because I don't feel like we had enough of her story. There were only mentions of it, and I loved the way that they represented her as a trans character that had been told by the Oracle her whole life that she was a man, and it was only when she was freed from the Oracle that she was able to step into her true identity. I thought that was really nicely done, but I just wanted more of that. So I want there to be her perspective, like her to be one of the perspective characters in the next book, and that would just, if I find out that happens, that would be the thing that would make me read it if it takes 3 years for them to write it.
Yeah.
What was your guys' favorite backstory?
Chloe. But I thought Eris's and is it Xander, the other brother?
Yeah.
That
I like
was an interesting one as well.
It was heartbreaking because you know it's
why
the
they didn't
dramatic
run
irony.
away. Like, I'm like, why didn't you just run away?
Because she's like brainwashed. Like she's not brainwashed by the Oracle, but like
That's
like,
how she was
yeah.
raised.
she was like groomed her whole
No, I
life.
know, but like they were talking about it, they were going to do it, and I'm like, you just not good enough. Just run quicker.
I know. I was waiting, like, just go, do it.
I was like, even
It's
though
not
you know
very
that they
fair.
don't make it because you've got like its backstory, you know the future. Like I was just like, come on, you can do it.
What I did find interesting, like in Eris's backstory, and I was also reading A Memory Called Empire at the same time, and both books have huge empires that are sprawling and taking more than they should, etc. And what was really interesting in both of those empires, although they're very civilized and everything like that, they had very barbaric definitions of who can rule. Like it's very, who is the strongest, you shall rule. And I was like, it's so interesting to have this sprawling space empire where most battles are not on the ground with a sword anymore, right? Like it's not a fantasy book, but it's still this like overwhelming, brutal show of force is what makes you the leader. And that was like in both books at the same time. And I was just like, it's very interesting.
And it's implied because she's the reason that whatever the horrible woman who teaches her how to do the murdery stuff implies that the reason she picks her is because she's the only girl who's survived to this point, which implies it's still really patriarchal, at least on some level. And so then to then have Eris have to shoulder that as well as part of her backstory, and then to get a nice group of space ladies. It's just nice.
Yeah, I think maybe I enjoyed the backstory elements more than the main story.
I think that's why I didn't care that much about Cato, because we didn't get that much of his backstory. I feel like if we got more of that, like in the second book, I would like him a whole lot more.
I think we will, because there were hints of like him having this medical background, but somehow he was the pilot.
Yeah.
And I think, again, if he's like either a perspective character or we get more of his backstory in the next book, then that would be something that I would be interested in reading.
Yeah, because he was really upset about that.
I do think one thing the book did really well, because I could never decide where I landed on it, was, we have so many perspectives, so we don't get to dive in as deep as I'm used to with any one character, because the book's only like, 400, 500 pages. There's no space for that. But it was never like so shallow that I felt like it spread too wide, but it was really close to spreading too wide. So I thought that balance was handled largely really well for me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I think some of the characters might have annoyed me if we'd spent more time with them. So I think it worked for me that there were that many perspectives, because it kept the interest. And I think that helped keep the pace up as well, that like when it was a different perspective in the next chapter, it kept the story moving. So that worked for me as well.
Although I didn't like that they did the classic thing, which is not their fault. Every story does this when you have the epic ending and then you switch perspectives right when the thing's going to happen to the next perspective. And that's classic. It's not their fault. That's just what we consume as stories. But I was just like, no, but I want to stay here because we're this thing.
Right?
Yeah, but that's a good frustration. You're like, oh, now I need to finish more. That's what they want from you.
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
But no, largely, I had a great time. It was fun. I would have not picked it up if not for this. I didn't know it existed. So,
And like nobody, like I would normally I get the physical and the audio and I switch back and forth, and none of my libraries had this.
My
They may have
library had
like the hard copy, but none of them had it digitally.
I made my library get the digital. One of my libraries had the digital. The other one, I made them get the digital because I think my friend will like this. And it's an expensive ebook. It's like over $10 or something, which is like a lot. And they had a physical, but they don't have any audio because I was going to try and use the audio because I read a lot of things in December. So I just in case, but I didn't have that option. So I didn't know if it was like an Audible exclusive or something.
It's not. I was saving my credit and I was finally like, oh my God, just use it. Which
I'm going to buy it, I think, physically because I enjoyed it. So
yeah, you can
maybe like the paperback. Oh, okay.
I might send it to you because I don't think I'm going to reread it. And I was pleased. I managed to get it secondhand in hardback, which meant it was a bit cheaper because the hardback was really expensive. So because if I'd loved it, which I thought I was going to, then I wouldn't mind. I don't mind buying hardbacks and I love them. But if you buy a hardback and then find it disappointing, it's like. So yeah, I'm glad that I managed to get it secondhand, which meant it was about half the price.
Speaking of hardback woes, when I bought Jade City and Jade War, Jade City was at print as you go. So it's a different edition to Jade War, which I didn't know when I bought it. And I spent like full hardback price on it. And now they're going to print it the correct way. So now my book collecting brain, which needs things to match, is like, do I buy it again?
Are they really going to do it?
Yeah, they really are. Fonda Lee posted it on Twitter yesterday. I know. It's supposed to be mid-January. I hate everything.
Can you write to the publisher and ask for a dust jacket that will match?
It's not just the dust jacket. It's also the inside. It's
very. Would that appease your collecting brain enough if you didn't have to look at them?
No, because when I read, I take off the dust jacket.
I'm so glad I don't have a collecting brain because.
Oh, see, I'm in the middle. I could do the dust jacket. That's a good idea.
I literally only buy like, I want to say at most 20 books a year. So like I like really try and like.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You just
it's not a big deal. I was going to accept it until she told me to
switch with you. Like they'll buy you a new one and they can have your old one or something.
I'm annoyed by it. It's fine. I'm also annoyed by everyone who told me Jade War was fast-paced. Everyone who told me Jade War was fast-paced was lying, and I dislike all of them for doing that.
I'm glad you read it before me now, so I won't go in like, okay, this is going to be a fast read.
No, it's the same, if not slower paced than Jade City, which is fine. It's totally fine. But I expected it to be the end of Jade City the whole time, and that's not it.
Oh.
I think that was just me desperately trying to read Jade War before anyone else read it and could ruin anything for me because I knew stuff was going to go down. I was like, no.
No, I mean, well, and I'm really happy she mentioned Jade Legacy is going to take place over even a longer span of time. So I'm like really prepared for the pacing of that one now. So I'm excited.
Oh.
Yeah, which if you don't know, if you're here, which no one's here, but we did a Jade City Space Sirens thing. You can go watch.
You did?
And I enjoyed that book even less than this one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's because it was very gruesome and patriarchal, and you didn't like any of the characters, right?
Yeah. And I feel like I keep missing the live shows for the books that I really love, and I only seem to be on the live shows for books that I'm either a bit meh about or I didn't enjoy at all. So I'm definitely going to have to get the next one in my diary straight away because I really love Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, and I'm so excited to be rereading it.
And the next one is A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, and I'm sure everyone and their mother will be here. I might not be, so other people can, because I'm not rereading it. I have read it, but that was like 2 years ago. So
I literally just reread it before I realized that it had won. I'm sure we said on our chat, but I'm an idiot and I forget these things very quickly. So I went and looked it up, and I think I texted you all guys and was like, "Oh, what is it? Oh, it's this." I literally just read it like 2 days ago.
I'm like a bad person. I have no heart, so Becky Chambers doesn't make me cry, and I'm like, oh, this was fine.
I'm the only
I just
one.
finished the latest one, and it made me cry twice.
Justine has a picture of me holding It's Closed in Common Orbit, but it would apply for any of the Becky Chambers books, and I'm just like in floods of tears, alone in my bedroom, and it's just captured with like so many emotions.
Can I have that, please? Because that's definitely
I'll
me.
send
Yeah, please share that.
I'll put it on the group.
So presumably, maybe a Saturday in February. It's going to be small
Probably
way.
like the first
Well-
week in February.
Do what?
Oh, you were going to say something, Stephanie. What?
Oh, I was just gonna say we're not the only book club reading it in January either. It's apparently very popular this month.
A lot of
Who
people
else
are
is
like,
reading
I read
it?
so much fantasy. I need to read sci-fi. So it's either The Expanse,
Yeah.
Red Rising, or Small Way to Song.
Yeah,
Oh,
Those
we
are
picked
the-
the right one.
but this will be my first time reading this one, and I'm excited because I've only read her novella, but I loved it.
Yeah.
I'm so excited for you. Honestly, it's such an experience. It's so joyful and wonderful and
It's
lovely.
nice slice of life. I don't normally like slice of life, but it was pretty good slice of life.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are rereading them because the final book comes out in February as well. That's why I'm glad. Like, I brought all my copies back with me of all the books, because like if I'm rereading the first one, I've got to reread the other two as well.
You see, I decided not to, and I wasn't going to read the first one. It was only because we recommended it to somebody, me and my friend Lauren, and then we got talking about how much we loved it, and we literally did like 10, 15 minutes of just us on the phone, like raving about how much we loved it, and then I was like, I'm going to reread it. And I have it on audio, and I've not listened to it, so it was a good excuse.
I'm in a group chat with my family, as one is, and one of my cousins is reading a lot of the stuff that I recommend because she likes to read sci-fi, and she read Becky Chambers and persuaded her dad, my uncle, to read it. And we were talking about it in this group chat because I'd posted on Facebook that I'd got to read the fourth one early, and we were talking about it. And my granny was like, "Oh, this sounds wonderful! I like sci-fi. I'd like to read this." And so I sent her a link, and then for about half an hour later, I was just like, "Oh yeah, there's that bit. Oh, and that bit. Oh, and that bit." I'm sure it'll be fine. I'll send her a message halfway through. If you are confused about the polyamorous.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna end the broadcast though, because
Yeah.
we have a unicorn story or something Nikki needs to tell us off screen. So things are happening.
Well, that's a cliffhanger for everybody else now. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, well, they can ask in the comments, and Nikki might give you a response. She might not.
There you go.
You'll have to find out. But thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in a month. And you can check us out on social media if you want to be up to date, because we're really bad at planning exact days ahead of time. So you'll definitely want to be following us on Twitter, because Stephanie kind of keeps everything on track over there. All right.
Twitter is the
Bye.
best. Bye, everyone.